Fellas, we are live. Welcome to another live stream. It's your boy Ian. Ian is back in the UK. I got back here last night from Kenya. And as you can see, I've got the beanie on because it is absolutely freezing. To be fair, my apartment is warm, but I just got back from town getting a coffee and I absolutely froze my tits off. So yeah, my head still needs a bit of warming before I get cozy and warm again. But yeah, happy to be back. New year, got lots of stuff lined up in terms of career and work and travel and linking up with friends and yeah, just lots of new developments to look forward to. So yeah, I'm just happy to be back here and just basically throwing myself into you know living and creating this new life. But that part, yeah, part of that is the channel doing live streams, and so I wanna, kick the year off with a nice juicy live stream. So yeah, as you can see in the title, of I think I labeled it something along the lines of "She doesn't speak on behalf of all women." Now, I guess before I even get started, let me just say who I am. So, if you don't know me, my name's Ian. I'm 28 years old. I live in the UK, born and raised here. But I also lived in Kenya for a few years. And yeah, I have a background in economics. I used to be an economic consultant, and then I went into data analysis for a more corporate company. And yeah, I recently left my job, but I'll be moving into tech sales. I want to have a tech sales career that will allow me to be fully remote and also increase my income earning opportunities. And most importantly, I had a very, very shitty dating life. I'd been in one relationship in the past, not the kind of relationship I wanted, to be honest, but that was the best I could get, you know. But other than that, my dating life was very undesirable. Didn't like it at all. Didn't like the options I had. To be honest with you, for the most part, I had no options at all. I even only, I had a 4 year dry streak up until, halfway through last year, which is obviously when I came across Cold Approach. And yeah, I changed my life through daytime Cold Approach after finding content like this on the internet, which spurred me into action. And yeah, my dating life took a complete 360. So yeah, I decided to make a channel to document my own journey, um, just to give you guys some relatable content and to yeah, and to show what's possible, right? Because I think most of us who come across this kind of content online, we're really looking for hope. We're looking for an example of somebody who we see and think, oh, okay, this guy did it. This guy seems to have been able to get himself out of the pit. So if he can do it, then why can't I do it, right? And so I just want to give you guys insight into how I was able to go from point A to point B in a fairly short amount of time. And of course, it took effort. Of course, it took um, yeah, effort and I guess a risk taking ability to put myself into the social fire. But eventually, I got results and I found my way to let's say not the peak, but to a successful point where I'm happy now with my dating life. I have options. I'm seeing a girl in London. I met a few girls out in Kenya. I was recently in Thailand and I had a couple of experiences there. And yeah, things are looking way rosier. The rainbows are out now. The sunshine is a bit brighter. So life is definitely better than it was because dating and relationships are important. They're a very important part of life. So yeah, once you have that side of things handled, then everything else just feels a bit better. So anyway, that's enough of an introduction. Now, like I said, the title is "She Doesn't Speak on Behalf of All Women," right? So, this stream is for the guys who, like me at one point. And when I say at one point, I mean probably up until a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. This is for the guys who felt or feel like they are unlovable, right? These are the I'm doing this stream specifically for the guys who, you wake up and on one hand you're fairly happy with your life, or you've done stuff in your life, you've achieved certain things, and on paper you're somewhat successful, not perfect, not a millionaire, but you've lived your life and you have something about you in terms of goals, plans, ambitions. You've been through some shit, you've put work in some area. Let's say you've been to school, been to university, got a degree, and you have a decent friendship group, or you've had friends, regardless of where those friends are. And, you take care of yourself to a degree, right? You're not too unhealthy, you're not too, um, you're not like a slob, but you basically, like, you're not perfect, you're not amazing or anything like that, but at some level, like, you can look at yourself in the mirror and go, I'm not like a hopeless piece of shit. I'm not like a basement dweller, right? And so, I think there's a lot of guys out there who feel like this, and I used to be somebody who felt like that as well, right? And so I think it's important to talk about this because at the start of this year, we're in a new year, right? People are trying to make changes in their lives. And for those of you who are probably trying to make changes to your dating life, it actually is super, super important to go into the year with the right mentality, because everything is up here, right? So it's all about how you see yourself, how you see the world, and all of that will infiltrate into how you move, right? And so I think it's really, really important to start off with the right mentality, right? And so the reason I titled it this way, the reason I titled the live stream, she doesn't speak on behalf of all women, is because when you approach a woman, when you shoot your shot, right, it can feel as if there's a lot riding on how she reacts, whether she likes you or not, and if she rejects you. And when she rejects you, which is inevitable because most women won't like you, when that happens, it's very easy to, one, take it personally, but more importantly, I think, is you then generalize and think, oh, because she rejected me, this must mean that everybody else will reject me, right? This must be how every other attractive woman will think about me, right? Because she rejected me, and therefore this must be the case for everybody else, right? So we make this sweeping generalization about the rest of the female race or the female gender or whatever, however you want to describe it, right? And we have this bias based off our experiences. And to be fair, I don't want to just single out as if it's just one woman rejects you or one girl rejects you, and then that's how we get to this place of making this negative generalization. Because I know that's not how it works, right? Most guys who I'm speaking to, or most guys who gravitate towards this content, like me, were probably rejected a couple of times, right? It happened multiple times across our lives when we were in primary school, secondary school, university, and even in our adulthood, right? So I'm not trying to undermine anybody's experience, because we've all been rejected multiple times. And when you're younger, it stings a bit more because we're way more vulnerable. We don't have the same level of maturity, and let's say endurance or mental resilience. So we take things a bit more personally. And of course, we're also trying to find our way in the world, which is when we start to shape our perspectives on how we see other people. And a lot of that is based on how people treat us, right? A lot of that is based on how other people react. And when it comes to girls, right, we all remember the first time we were attracted to, Sandy in math class, or we saw Viola with her really like cute sports outfit when she was playing netball in year 9, right? And like we all thought, oh, like she looks cute and I like her. And then maybe we shot our shot, and it didn't go well, right? So these kind of experiences, I get it. We've had them, and and to be fair, it makes sense, right? Like that would shape how you view the world, right? But it's important to break out of this as adults, right? And to recognize that this isn't a conducive or useful way to think about women in general, right? And so the way that we should think about it is we have to always wake up and think there are women out there who will like you, right? I'll say it again. There are women out there right now that will like you as you are, right? And so Ephraim, I love the way Ephraim says this. He says, you are dateable, right? Like that's what he says. He always says you are dateable as you are, and it's hard to hear that message when you look back at your life and think, well, I haven't dated anybody, or I haven't dated anybody I want to date, or I've been in bad relationships, or I get rejected all the time. Because it's one thing to hear somebody say you're dateable, but then you look at your life objectively and you think, well, clearly I'm not. I must be the exception. I must be the ugly ass exception who is just hopeless and destitute and will never ever find what I want or what I'm looking for, right? But and so I want to just like let's say reassure you that one, you're not the only person who's either feeling like that or the only person who's ever had these kind of thoughts through their head. And more importantly, I would even say that there are guys out there who used to think like you and who have now got onto the other side or made it out onto the other side, still intact, but also they've actually been able to switch their experiences around and get to a place where now they are dating the girls they want to date, right? And I'm an example of that, right? And it's worth bearing in mind that I still have a lot of progress to make. So I wouldn't even consider myself to be like at the peak of where I want to be, right? But I'm like the life I had before versus the life I have now, dating wise, romantically, is like black and white. It's like night and day. So yes, it's important to switch your mentality, right? But I understand why it's hard, and I understand why people are in this, let's say, negative bias, and they have this idea that they're just eternally cooked and they'll always be down bad and never be able to get the girls they want or get any action whatsoever. And I get it because nowadays, and this is where I was, right? I fell victim to the internet, specifically the black pill, red pill ideology that was very, let's say, convicted in telling me that I had to look a certain way or have a certain amount of money in the bank, right? And so I actually want to focus on the black pill and more specifically on the looks aspect, because I actually think this is the biggest issue, right? And I've seen that there's a guy online, I think it's called, is it Clavicula or something? He's been popping off recently. I've not watched any of his videos or interviews. I've just seen him on my YouTube recommended page. And I know he's like known for the guy who takes looks maxing to its extreme. I'm not going to talk too much about him. I don't know who he is. But the point is, this is clearly a thing that guys are really, let's say, swayed by. Their opinions and their perceptions on how fuckable they are individually is clearly being informed by all this black pill, looks maxing dogma. And I get it because I was somewhat in that space, or at the very least, I was listening to the messages, and the messages, they actually like affected the way that I viewed myself, right? Because, you know, if you think about it, like the black pill will use all these stats, right? It will throw all these stats on attraction, physical attraction, what women are into, and how that translates into dating success. And they have all this research to back it up. And of course, if you're a logical guy, right, and you have some level of let's say, not just common sense, but just an ability to, just an open mind, and you're able to look at stats or look at evidence and make conclusions on that, then it makes sense why you would think that, oh, this person quoted this paper that says guys with a certain jawline or guys with a certain facial symmetry or guys who sound a certain way tend to be more successful than guys who don't have those physical traits. So we get that information, right? And we then think, okay, so now this isn't just the case of me, because like think about this, right? Remember how I said, sorry, I just saw a comment. Rami Dino says hi. Hello, Rami Dino. I'll address comments at the end of the live stream. But I wanna get this point across home. I want to get this point home, and really drill it home because I think it's really important. But yeah, anyway, back to what I was saying. So remember how at the beginning I said that I understand why we have certain beliefs about what women will want because of our previous experiences, right? But so remember that everything I'm talking about in that instance, that's all anecdotal, right? So that's all based on something that happened in high school or university or maybe even recently, right? So that's an anecdotal experience. But now I'm talking about empirical evidence. Yeah, now I'm talking about studies that have the weight of research behind them. So now we're not really getting into subjective experience. Now we're getting into something that feels a bit more objective, right? And I think that's why the black pill is so destructive and powerful and convincing, right? It's because the black pill is it has the weight of research, right? But the reality is that even if it's research, even if these are studies, right? And again, I would even put a quote on that because we don't know how foolproof these studies are. We don't know how the surveys have been dished out. We don't even know who's answering the surveys. And we don't even know where have these surveys been conducted, right? I would encourage you to question all of this stuff, right? And so, and one thing that I want to, let's say, push back on or make you aware of is these surveys never consider the fact that, you know, there are so many things in life or people in the world who say certain things when they're asked about it, but in reality, right, if you actually looked at their objective life over period of time, they go against what they would say, right? So there are people who say, I prefer this, I prefer that, right? When you put them in a room and put the clipboard in their face. But if you actually observe their life, you realize that they often make decisions that go against the norm, that go against what is expected of them, right? And why is that? If we're talking about dating, right? You realize that people in their dating lives, sometimes, a lot of the time, they date people that maybe on paper they would have never thought that they would be that attracted to, but they end up being attracted to that person because that person was a little bit different to everybody else, right? That person had a certain vibe. And a lot of the time, women or girls or whatever, that they struggle to articulate what that is. But oftentimes it'll be, he just has something about him, a vibe, a confidence, the way he entered the room. And of course, again, these are things that I would argue you can work on, right? But it isn't often anything to do with the guy's fucking facial structure or his jawline or his beard length. Like a lot of the time it's about this vibe. And again, it maybe to a degree it's good that they're not very specific because if they were to be specific about what this vibe is, then us logical guys would then we might take it overboard and think, okay, that means I need to optimize my this particular trait about me, my humor, let's say, right? And so we might take it too far, right? And try to like max that out in an unhealthy way. But the point is, like, what I'm trying to say is the stats don't tell the full story. Yeah, the research doesn't tell the full story, right? The research is just one aspect of how people make decisions. And remember, it's a sample, it's a survey based on a sample of people. So, and of course, the sample is supposed to represent like let's say a proportionally representative portion of society. Okay, right? That's how they do it, so that it tries to map onto the world, because the reality is that they can't ask every single woman on the world or on the planet, what do you like and why do you like that. But again, that just goes to my point, which is this is just one research paper or a couple, right? And like I said, there are examples of guys who break this mold, guys who go against the grain and find success even though they don't fit into this average, right? Because it's at the end of the day, like, it's an average, right? But I would say just be careful, yeah. Don't buy into it too much, right? And so I think this black pill, let's say black pill research based ideology is it's a really poisonous cycle, because what ends up happening is, you're a guy like me, right? So I'll speak for myself, right? So I had a lot of insecurities about my appearance, right? Not just like the way I look like facially, but like my body frame, right? So specifically my muscle mass, right? Because I'm a fairly skinny guy. And so I used to have a lot of insecurities about my skinniness, right? And so I had this insecurity, right? And then I went online and I would see black pill videos, red pill videos that would say you need to have X amount of muscle mass in order to get women, right? And maybe other videos would go as far as to say that if you were skinny, then your chances of getting women were low or even non-existent, right? And so I had to look like a certain Chad with a certain muscle mass and frame and chest and biceps, etc. Right? And so I used to look at that and go, okay, maybe that explains why my dating life is terrible, right? I would genuinely think that, right? And then that same guy, so me, I see that information and I think, oh, so that means that I'm fundamentally fucked. Yeah, I'm fundamentally cooked because I don't fit that archetype. I don't fit that description, which means that I don't qualify as attractive enough for women in general. And remember, the way that they're positioning this is that if you don't fit X characteristic, then women won't like you, right? Like they're broadly generalizing this idea that person Y can't get women for this reason. And so I used to watch those videos and think, oh, I'm cooked, right? And so I would think, okay, this means that I then need to go and change everything. So I remember this so vividly because I remember coming across those videos, that content, and then I immediately thought, okay, I need to start hitting the gym. Like I need to start going to the gym and building more muscle, right? Because that's what's going to fix my dating life, right? So I remember going to the gym, trying to gain muscle, and of course, I'm doing it for, I mean, arguably, I don't think I want to say it was the wrong reason because like going to the gym for the pure reason to attract women, I don't know if that's a good healthy reason. And I also don't know if that's a sustainable reason to go to the gym. But either way, I made that decision, right? But of course, you can imagine that I'm going to the gym trying to gain muscle, but in my head, subconsciously, I know when I wake up in the morning, I think to myself, I'm not fuckable, I'm not lovable, I'm not attractive as I am right now. So even though I was working towards getting more muscle and being healthier, which is a good thing to do, by the way, right? If it's done in the right way for the right reasons. But even though I was on that journey, deep down inside, I still felt insignificant. I still felt undateable. And so I would walk around in the open, in public, with that in my mind, right? And so what ends up happening, or what ended up happening, was that I lost confidence in myself. Confidence that might have been gained from things that I was successful in, right? That weren't related to how much muscle I had, and I lost that confidence over time. And then when you lose that confidence, the next step of the cycle is, well, I have low confidence, and therefore I show up with low confidence to certain places or certain events, whether it's house parties or seeing friends or meeting other women in different contexts, right? And so that low confidence translates into a lack or a lacking or a lack of the ability, or let's say an inability to, let's say, showcase my strengths or showcase the things that I do like about myself, right? And so that now negatively impacts my success with women, right? And then I think to myself, oh, okay, so the black pill is right, because clearly I've tried to shoot my shot and it isn't working, right? But I'm not knowing, I'm doing this, or I'm saying this, not knowing that the reality is that I've just sabotaged any success because I believe that my skinny frame is what's holding me back. But it's not that my skinny frame was holding me back. It's that the idea or the belief that I think that my skinny frame is holding me back is what was holding me back. Does that make sense? Like, it's not the issue. The issue isn't that I'm skinny. It's that I think that being skinny is an issue. And think about how sinister that is, because ultimately, what am I really saying there? What I'm saying is I'm fundamentally broken, right? And that I can't find success unless I get to this point. And so, of course, I then blame myself, or I blame, my circumstances, or I blame my genetics. And then I think, okay, well, there it is. Like, this isn't worth trying to fix, right? Like, there's no point in trying to fix this, because if I have to wait 3 years to build the body I want, does that mean that I need to suffer for 3 years, right? And so that's the poisonous cycle of that black pill ideology, right? Now, I would I would like to offer pushback, right, on the black pill ideology, because I would like to think about the counter examples, right? So, you know, like I said, these papers or research or whatever these guys are spouting, it's based on samples, right? But I would challenge anybody to ask themselves, okay, but have I seen examples of guys who don't fit this criteria, who are clearly successful? And of course you have, right? We've all been there. We've all seen guys who, on paper, they don't look like they should be able to get that girl, right? Because she seems to be out of his league. But somehow, some way, they found a way into her panties, and they rock up with confidence, and they rock up like they own the place, and they have no reservations or no doubts about how dateable and how fuckable they are as guys, right? And so, like, think about that guy, because I would ask myself, if you're a logical guy, you think, okay, so I have all this research here that tells me I have to look like this in order to get a girl like that. But then I look to this guy and I go, wait, but that guy doesn't have that. He looks like me. Maybe he even looks worse than me. Worse because, again, we're just using this physical attraction shit. But in reality, we really shouldn't be really thinking about it in that way. But for the sake of the argument, he looks objectively worse than me on paper. But he's fucking chicks who are hotter than me. He's getting laid by girls who are hotter than me. Sorry. He's getting laid by girls who are hot. Not hotter than me, because I'm not a girl. He's getting laid by girls who are attractive, right? So, like, he's clearly the exception to the rule. But then it makes you wonder, well, what is the rule? Maybe the rule doesn't really exist. Or maybe the rule is just an average. But, like, since when did we all make decisions based on these averages, right? And if you're somebody who just wants to be average, okay, fine, whatever, cool. If you just want to live your life based on research papers, okay, cool. Like, so be it. Be my guest. But I don't know. Like, to me, that's just either cope, or it's just an inability to want to grow or change or defy society's norms. And of course, I'm speaking to guys who are like tired of falling for the norms, tired of just accepting the basic, things of life. Like, I'm speaking to guys who actually want to like transform their lives, right? Guys who want to not just settle, but actually go for what they want, because they're tired of accepting all this bullshit, right? Because that's where I was. I was just fed up, and I was like, fuck the norm, fuck the average, fuck doing what everybody else says I should do, or where the masses tend to go. I'm actually gonna take a second to really think and go, what do I want? And like, is this all that there is? Like, is this the only thing that I can go for? Or is there something greater that I can actually strive for? So if you're that guy, then the average doesn't matter to you. So you look at the guy, if you're like me, you look at the guy who doesn't fit the archetype of Chad, but gets the hot girl, and you think, what does he have that I don't have? And that's the real question, right? And so I think if we're trying to answer, okay, what does that guy have that I don't have? I think a cool thing to look at, or a cool perspective to take, would be to let's rewind, right? So let's rewind from all this modern dating nonsense, right? And let's just take a step into like the more primal, tribal perspective, or let's say example. Because I was just in Kenya, yeah, and Kenya is a big, diverse country. It's a developing country too. But in Kenya, there are parts of Kenya that aren't as, let's say, modern as Nairobi, which is a big city, or Mombasa. And, sometimes when I'm driving, so when I drive to my dad's hometown, which is a smaller town, but it's still fairly modern, on the way to my dad's hometown, you'll drive past villages and places that are clearly still, let's say, underdeveloped, or still, they're set in their more old school rural ways, right? Now, when I was thinking about this topic, right, of uh, dating and trying to find women who are attractive to us, sorry, women who find us attractive, I realized that, you know, all of this stuff that I'm talking about is all modern day stuff, but there are still places in the world that are, let's say, still operating in a more traditional sense. And it got me thinking about a specific tribe, right, called the Maasais. And the Maasais are a tribe in Kenya who, they're a fairly sizable tribe, right? They're one of the major tribes in Kenya. I forget where they're specifically located, but the point is, for this example, you know, they're more like a kind of, let's say, hunter gatherer tribe, right? They fit that old school archetype of they hunt what they eat, and they have these like very small tight knit communities, right? And there's also like a very particular hierarchy of command, let's say. And so the men do this and the women do this, right? And so let me land the example, right? I know I feel like I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but you'll see the point I'm going to make, right? So I want you to think about the fact that these Maasai men specifically, they have a specific like body type, right? They have a specific, let's say, build, because they're from a particular part of Kenya where, just because, East Africa, for example, you guys might have seen it before, right? We're known to be really good marathon runners. We always clean up in the Olympics or any sort of marathon competition because, you know, I think a part of it is because of the environment that people from East Africa have grown up in, high altitude, mountainous, and so they're fairly well built for that kind of let's say athleticism or sport, and so they do well, right? And so you'll notice that tribes in the Maasai, they have like they're tall, they're very tall, and they're also skinny, right? And so they're known to be really good jumpers. And again, I don't want to get too deep into like the physical attribute thing, but the point is, you can go into these tribes, right, and you can watch how these guys operate, and you'll see that there are guys there, skinny, tall, who have 5 wives, who have 6 wives, or who are hunters. They may be the tribal leader, they might not be. Maybe they're like the second in command, or maybe they're just one of the the tribal, let's say, hunters who doesn't have any particular level of authority, let's say, compared to the leader, but they're still part of the tribe, right? And so these guys are successful, right? They still, let's say, procreate. They still have wives and children, and they look at themselves, and I imagine they wake up and think, I'm the shit. They don't wake up and think, oh, like, I'm skinny, therefore I'm a piece of shit, let me go and off myself, or like leave the tribe. No, no, no. They wake up with confidence, right? And why is that? Why is that? One is because they're not on YouTube going down the black pill rabbit hole, right? So if they're living in a completely different world to us, but in their world, their idea of what it means to be, let's say, a man, or what it means to be successful, or what it means to be fuckable is different to ours. They're not focused on their looks or their looks maxing. For them, it's all about, have I provided for my family? Have I been able to, am I courageous, right? Can I get out here and hunt and do my tribe proud, right? Make my tribe proud. And so on this point, I want to cite a study. Now, I know I was shitting on studies earlier, but this is a very specific study, right? And it's what people would call like a meta-analysis, right? So a meta-analysis is basically a study of like multiple studies, and it's typically done across a very wide sample size, because the point is that they want to try and increase the credibility of the findings by by diversifying the pool of research as much as possible, rather than just doing one study, right? And so there is some meta study out there. I found it. I mean, I don't have the specific study, sorry, but I found the article that that cited it, which was something I read by a guy called Rob Henderson on Substack. And in it, he was talking about rites of passage, like male rites of passage. And it was interesting because this meta-analysis, which is like an anthropological analysis, it basically reviewed multiple cultures around the world, and it tried to find the common status markers, or the common markers of status that were found across different tribes around the world, specifically hunter-gatherer societies that haven't been affected by modernity. So it's important to make this point because these are societies that are still operating from a more traditional, simple, primal paradigm, which I think is important because at the end of the day, as guys, we are still primal at some level. Sure, we have all these modern inventions and innovations, and we're not out here hunting or running away from lions. And, if you are, good luck to you, mate. But like, I'm good. I'm in a nice country. Like, where most of us have water, running water, food. We don't have to hunt. We're protected against the elements. I mean, I've got my beanie on. Like, I'm in a nice shelter. Like, we're fine, right? But these societies are still living in a more predated context, right? So they're the perfect example of what to look for because they don't have all this new age stuff, which I'm not saying has no relevance. The reality is that we live in a modern time and times have shifted. So there is some importance or weight to all these new modern developments. But I would encourage you to remember that at the end of the day, like, we're still primal. Yeah. And so the study looked at these societies and found that the most common trait or the most common marker of status amongst all these tribes was endurance, right? And it specifically said physical and emotional endurance. Now, when it said physical, because I was interested to see what they meant by physical didn't mean the ability in terms of like physical appearance, right? It wasn't physical appearance. It was, and I quote it was the ability to have physical endurance in, let's say, extreme conditions, right? So basically stuff like, were they able to, like, who could hunt for the longest, let's say, right? But the focus was on the endurance part, right? So it was physical endurance and emotional endurance, right? And so it said that the reason why these specific traits were most valued in terms of status and success in these tribes and respect is because they were intended to test courage, self-control, and the ability to endure hardship. So that is what essentially had the biggest, let's say, correlation with whether or not people were successful. It's from a status perspective. And of course, if they're successful status-wise, then they're more likely to be able to procreate, have children, have wives, etc. Right? So it had nothing to do with looks maxing or whatever. Because think about it, like I just mentioned, there are tribes out there where guys just maybe have more slender frames, right? And they still found their success in their tribe, right? So it's not about necessarily the muscle mass. I'm really trying to drive this point home. Like, it's more about endurance, resilience, right? These are the words that should come to mind, right? The tenacity, the ability to make it out the wilderness, right? And so if you have, so if you just map this onto the modern world, like I said, we don't have to do all the same stuff that our ancestors used to fight against. And so for us, we need to look at our lives and go, okay, have I endured hardship in my life? Have I tested myself? Have I committed to a goal? Have I shown some level of ambition? Do I take care of myself? How courageous am I? Do I have some level of self-control? And if the answer is yes, then yeah, the chances are you will be able to get what you want eventually, right? And so, it's worth remembering that if you have these qualities, right, then there are thousands, even tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of eligible single women who will like you. right? They'll be attracted to you. The only issue is that we just have to get out there and face them, right? Get in front of them, position ourselves around them, right? It's a numbers game at the end of the day, right? I mean, in an ideal world, you could say, oh, back in the day, our parents didn't have to go through all that rejection and they just found each other. Okay, whatever, cool. But at the same time, if you want better options, then you just have to put yourself out there more, right? And I'm trying to really, let's say, emphasize the fact that the stats, that's those stats from before about you have to look like this or look like that in order to get what you want. Like, fuck those stats, yeah? Like, just don't pay attention to them, right? Because they will infect your mind. Like, whether you like it or not, those stats will infect your mind, poison your mind, and poison the way that you view yourself. So, really be careful with the content that you're consuming if it's trying to take you down that rabbit hole. And if you find yourself almost, let's say, succumbing to those stats, take a step back and think, oh wait, but I remember Ian said that there's examples out there of guys who don't fit the bill. And you don't even have to take it from me. I don't have to be the one to tell you that there's examples of guys out there who are successful or have really good dating lives but don't fit that, let's say, archetype. You can see it yourself. Just go outside. If you live in a city with lots of people, just go outside and you'll see them, right? They exist. They're there, right? And I don't think they're not that special. Yeah, they've just put more work in to certain aspects of their personality or their life, which has essentially enabled them to come out the other end with more confidence and self-belief. And so now they believe that they're the shit, right? But it's all a process of, like I said, you've done hard things, you've put yourself out there, you've tried to build something, you've tried to make something out of your life. And I really want to be intentional when I say, I'm not saying that you have to be like this super successful person or this like high flying entrepreneur who makes millions or even makes hundreds of thousands. Like, I don't make that much money. I'm unemployed right now. I'm just in transition. I'm moving into a new career, right? Of course, I had a job before and I've had other jobs and I've made money here and there, and I've traveled a bit as well. And I can understand that in some level I've had privileges that maybe other people haven't had. But again, I have to keep saying this. There are people who have less than me, have had less than me, have been less successful than me, if we're judging it by these traditional metrics, and they have better dating lives than me, right? They have more success than me. They have more confidence than me. Yeah, so these guys exist. There's always a guy out there who disproves your bias. There is. There will always be somebody. It doesn't matter. Now you could say, yeah, but he's just like one person, or that's only a few people. Okay, but the point is he exists, right? That person exists. And it's funny because at some level, I'm probably that person to somebody else, right? So like there's probably somebody out there complaining about their dating life, and understandably so, because we've all been there. We've all, find ourselves at the bottom, rock bottom, thinking, like nothing seems to be working, right? And we think, oh, it's because of me, it's because of how I look or how I am. And then the guy probably saw me with the girl I'm dating right now in London, this French girl, and he sees me and he goes, wait, what? Like, how did he get her? He looks like me. In fact, he looks quote unquote worse than me, whatever that means, right? How did he get her? So those guys exist, right? I am now the example. That's so funny, isn't it? How the world works. I now might be the example to that guy. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but like somebody out there will look at me and think that, right? So just don't buy the stats, please. Do whatever you can to not consume that content too much. And if you are consuming it, it's just one perspective, okay? Consider the alternative perspective, the more optimistic perspective, which will actually at least give you a chance, right? And so look, just because one girl rejects you, or 10 girls reject you, or 50 girls reject you, or 100 girls reject you, it doesn't mean that they are the spokesperson for every other woman, yeah? Like, don't take it to heart too much, even though it feels personal and it feels as if it's happening again and again and again. the chances are you will eventually find someone who likes you, right? Now, will it take a lot of effort? Yeah, maybe it will, and maybe it needs to. Yeah, maybe it should take a lot of effort because maybe you're not where you need to be, just like I wasn't where I needed to be when I first started Cold Approach by myself, solo. Yeah, I didn't get instant results because I didn't deserve instant results. Yeah, I had to keep trudging through, iterating as much as I could because I initially started by myself. So I had to iterate, try and track things. I took a fairly nerdy approach to it, but for good reason, because I wanted to get better, like any other skill, because it is a skill, right? I think a lot of us have this expectation that somehow we're just supposed to be good at dating or good at flirting or good at socializing with women, right? In these contexts. And maybe that's because we look at people where we look at people online, or you might even have friends who just seem to be really good at it from the get-go. They're just like clearly gifted, right? And then what we do is we probably put them in that bucket of guys who fit that statistic that says, oh, the guys who look like this or are like this, they're the successful ones. And we loop them into that bucket and say, oh, it's because of their genes, or it's because they're just better, that they're just naturally gifted at the art of seduction. But in reality, I mean, sure, maybe they had it easier in high school, and so we're just a bit of a late bloomer, but it doesn't mean that it's all natural, right? We all have predispositions, fine, but it's like a learnable. It's definitely learnable for most guys. There probably is a subcategory of guys who, for whatever reason, they have like any sort of either mental ailment or disability, or maybe like a significant like facial disfigurement, right? Maybe they got burnt, unfortunately, when they were younger. Like, I mean, like physically burnt. And so that's left them a little bit disfigured. And like, my heart goes out to those guys. And even those guys, I'm sure that they can find somebody who they can connect with at a romantic level. And I really hope they do. But like, I'm not talking about those edge cases. I'm talking about like most guys, right? And so, it's hard because I can't make a judgment on how, let's say, dateable you are. That's something that you have to decide yourself, just like I had to as well. But I wish, and to be fair, I don't wish, because I actually found this content through Ephraim and Christian. But I was lucky to find somebody or people that believed in me more than I believed in myself, and were trying to encourage me to put myself out there as I was. They didn't tell me to go get more muscle. They told me, dude, you're probably already dateable, right? You just need to put yourself out there. And so, get your head out of this black pill rabbit hole, and just, make an effort and try to get more evidence for yourself. And getting more evidence isn't one approach or 10 approaches or 50 or even 100, right? Maybe it's more than that, right? Because again, we're all starting at different places, right? And so, like I said, I needed to go through the motions. I needed to go through the journey, because it turns out that I actually had more internal work to do than I thought I did, right? And so that's why code approach is great, because it is the great equalizer. There are no shortcuts. If you want to get the results you desire, you have to get to a certain level of inner confidence, inner belief. And that there's no shortcuts to getting to that point. You have to take your licks. You have to, get your ass kicked, handed to you, be humbled, yeah. Have that. I've talked about it. Like, you have your dick in your hand. That moment when you've been rejected in front of people, and you're standing there in public and thinking, "Damn, that kind of feels rough." You have to go through that, yeah. But like I said, remember that meta study that said courage, the ability to endure hardship, self-control. Those are the traits, the common traits. Remember, this is common traits across multiple societies around the world that aren't in contact with each other. They don't have access to wheat waffles, black pill, whatever the fuck, whatever content creator you want to put in that category. They don't listen to that stuff, which means that this is at some level. I wouldn't say it's objective truth, because I think all of that is still, like, I don't know. I don't even know if there's an objective truth, to be honest. I think like morality and all these things, they're kind of subjective at some level, but the fact that these are commonly found across societies, and societies that are, let's say, are more representative of our ancestors, like, to me that gives us a very big clue as to what we should actually be focusing on. Yeah. because all of this other stuff is modern day stuff, right? And it's biased. So yeah, my I guess my final point is, like, believe in yourself. Yeah, believe in yourself. Believe in what you could achieve with what you already have as you are, and instead of focusing too much on the external or the surface level stuff, once you're at a point where you feel like you're presentable, yeah, so your hygiene is good, and you have a, let's say, like a decent look to you, and I really mean that, like a decent look, yeah, nothing flashy, just a decent look that you're fairly happy with, then the most important thing to focus on is internal work. Yeah, and internal work is like really broad, and there's so many levels to it. And so I'm not going to talk about that in this stream, because those could literally be individual streams or each, let's say, internal characteristic when it comes to inner game and confidence and self-belief, and dealing with shame, dealing with insecurities. And so those are traits that, yes, can be worked on, that I've worked on, that I've strengthened or gotten rid of, depending on whether or not they were favorable or unfavorable. But just focusing on those characteristics is way more important than the looks aspect. And so if you do get rejected by a girl or by multiple girls, don't come away from that experience thinking, oh, this must mean that I'm eternally fucked. Yeah. Because she isn't a spokesperson for everybody. Yeah, she isn't. There are women out there who will respond well to you if you just go about it in the right way, having practiced cold approach a good amount of times and iterated and fixed any, let's say, sticking points that you might have. And so, yeah, that's harder to do when you're alone, but it's certainly possible if you're committed enough. Yeah, if you're committed enough, you'll get there eventually, by fire or by force. Huh? So yeah, and I hope that's the mentality that you guys can go into this year with, right? Because this year is like a big year. Yeah, I mean, we say that every year, to be honest, but I think this year is a really big year because there's just so much going on with the world, with like AI and dating and birth rate, fertility crises, and people are. I feel like people are waking up, but if you're waking up, then you also need to attach that, let's say, new perspective with action and actually putting yourself out there. And so yeah, don't be discouraged, right? Don't be discouraged by black pill stats or ideology, and don't be discouraged by the handful of experiences you've had in the real world when it comes to putting yourself out there and getting rejected. Yeah. Because like I said, and I'm going to say it again, she does not speak on behalf of all women. There are hundreds of thousands of women out there. And let's say only 1% of the hundreds of thousands of women were into you. I mean, how many women is that, right? 1% of 100,000. My maths is a bit slow because I'm a little bit tired. I'm pretty sure that is, wait, let's see, 1% of 100,000. I'm pretty sure is that 100, is that 10,000? That's 1,000, okay. 1,000. I'm really showing my math skills here. 1,000, right? So 1% of 100,000 women is 1,000 women. So let's say 1% of women like you. That's a fair stat, right? Like 1% of women would like you, right? That seems fairly realistic. That's 1,000 women out there, right? And I don't have an answer on when you're going to meet them, when you're going to bump into them, where they're from, what they look like. But I can guarantee you that there are 1,000 women out there who you're attracted to and that they'll be attracted to you. I can guarantee it. Yeah. So to that I say, just good luck. Good luck trying to find them. If you ask me, I think the best way to find them is through cold approach, daytime cold approach, right? Just having the courage to walk up and say hi and have a bit of a flirty conversation if you can, and then get the number, get the date lined up, go on a date, and then see if you're compatible. Like to me, that's the best way to do it, right? Because it worked for me. Yeah, I don't believe in the other methods of Instagram DMs, dating apps. Like because if those aren't working for you, then I feel like cold approach is the best alternative. right? Because if dating apps work for you, then kudos to you, man. Like, if it works, it works. You know, all of this is about trying to generate leads. Like, all of this is about trying to, you know, get or find as many opportunities as we can. So if that works, then cool. But we already know, like, it's not working for most guys. Yeah, those methods of dating apps and IG DMs or social circle, like, it's not working for most guys. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a dating crisis, right? So yeah, take your pick, whatever you want, whatever resonates with you, try it out. Okay, that's it then. Um, yeah, there's only one viewer. Shout out to that one viewer. I don't know if there's any questions. Please ask away for that one person if it's an actual follower, but it might be a troll. Um, but yeah, that's about it really. Um, yeah, in terms of what I'm doing now, so I'm gonna eat some breakfast or late breakfast, and then I think my London French girl, she wants to see me. We might see each other today. Although I just got back from Kenya, so I've got a few errands to run, and I actually think she's got plans earlier for the day, so I might see her later this evening. We'll see about that. Um, and then yeah, not much else really. Just pushing on with the job front. I've actually got a call later on today with the tech course, the tech course that I'm a part of. So yeah, I'll prep for that before that meeting. But that's about it really. Otherwise, I'll just be preparing for the week ahead. But yeah, I don't think there's anybody else watching, and there aren't any real comments or sorry, any real questions. So we'll leave it there. But yeah, like I said, good luck, boys. Keep on approaching, and yeah, let's try and get some results this year. Yeah, let's really move the needle. Let's really put some work in, and recreate or create the dating life that we actually deserve, right? Because like I said, most of you guys, there are women out there who will like you for who you are, and if you don't believe it, then I believe it. Yeah, and I didn't believe it at one point, and now I actually believe it because it's my reality. But it's only my reality because at one point I decided, you know what? Even though I don't fully believe it, even though what they're saying makes sense, and I don't really agree with it, or I'm not fully convinced that I am at that level yet, I'm still gonna give myself a chance and put myself out there. And so if that's the least you can do, then just please do that. Yeah, I don't need you to fully believe me because I know that I don't know you that well. You know, you might be thinking, oh, but Ian, easy for you to say, you know, you've not lived the life I've lived. And look, I haven't lived the life you live, right? We're all different. We've all had different experiences. I don't know what you've been through. So I'm not going to sit here and say that I have the entire answer for you. But if you relate to something I said, then chances are that you're probably in a similar boat to where I was. And so instead of letting that boat sink, let's keep rowing. Yeah, let's just keep rowing. Let's keep pushing. Let's keep afloat. And then maybe eventually we'll find shore or we'll find that paradise island. Yeah. But let's just keep fucking rowing. All right. Peace out, boys.